Hello everyone and welcome to a Creative Design Team YouTube collaboration video where this month we're concentrating on busy papers and creative ways to use them. I've got in front of me the Deck the Palms collection, which is still available at the time of me doing this recording. This was a paper pack where I fell in love with this ombre type style. I love the pink wash on this paper, and I also love this pattern as well. I really love the green foliage of all the monstera leaves and the other leaves here. And it was one that featured a summery flamingo type vibe with some of the prints, and also some Christmas on one side and then floral on the other for this one, so it didn't have to be a Christmas themed paper. And this one here that has the flamingos on it, and on the other side there are flamingos dressed up as Santa hats. You may have seen me use this pattern before where I cut these pieces up to make some Christmas tags in my Christmas tag series. But I'm going to use this pattern today to create a scrapbooking layout. I'm also going to show a card at the end of this as well, and how to use a busy paper on a card. I've already gone ahead and cut this piece of pattern paper to 5.5 by 11.5. I'm going to be doing a double page layout today, but I'm going to concentrate firstly on the left side. So you can see I've got a white border all the way around this one. By trimming down busy papers and then layering things over the top of them, that is a good way to use this type of paper. I'm going to bring in this mint semicircle, so I'm thinking I might put that up against here. This is left over from a Cricut cut that I did where I used the outside section, but I kept the semicircles. Now, for all of you who love flamingos, don't gasp, but I'm actually going to cover those pieces up, and I'm going to use some white daisy that I've trimmed down another 1/2 inch from the pattern paper so that I get a 1/4 inch border all the way around. So this one here is at 5 inches by 11 inches. But I'm not going to cover this up entirely. I'm going to cut a circle out of this. So I'll just run through briefly what I'm going to be using today to create this. I've got the tabs thin cuts, I've got the slim alphabet thin cuts, and I've got the circle shaker window thin cuts or dies. I'm going to use these on my layouts, and for the piece that I'm going to cut out, I'm going to use this open circle, and I'm going to cut a piece out down here where I'm going to miss most of the flamingos, and then I'll attach it with some washi tape and run these through my die cutting machine. So you can see with this piece cut out of it, I'm getting this gorgeous pattern with the leaves and the floral elements, and the flamingo part of it is hidden. If you wanted to highlight a certain pattern that's in your busy pattern paper, you can position this so that you've got something else peeking out from here. I could have put the title about here and had the palm tree coming out, or I could have put it at the top and you would have seen the flamingo coming out. So it all depends where you position the die cut as to what is going to peek through. Before I adhere this together, I'm actually going to do some stamping. So I'm going to use some almond ink, and the stamp sets I'm going to be using today are the date stamp, which is in the core catalogue. I'm going to use this note card section as my journaling, and I'm also going to use a couple of these little words on this note card area. And I'm bringing in the Perfectly Imperfect patterns, and I'm using the little dots here and the little hearts. And I've actually saved the 1/2 inch strip from the top of this and trimmed that down to the width of the white daisy. So I'm going to adhere that to this white piece. And I don't want to adhere all of these sections just yet because I want to do some stamping on top of it, and I'm going to be using some foam tape. So I don't want to quite do my stamping before I put that on. So I'm just going across the top, and then I'll bring in some copy paper to mask off the end. And I'm also going to go across the bottom section here with these little dots. It's just going to add a little bit of visual interest. I'm also going to do some stamping around this mint circle. I'm sorry if you can hear some construction noises. they're developing next door, and I'm trying to do my recordings when it's not happening, but I don't always know when they're going to turn up. So I'm hoping that is not going to distract too much from the video. Having our clear stamp sets, I'm able to curve this heart just a little bit. And then see, that's a little bit too much. I want to stamp some hearts around the edges of this semicircle. So I'm just going to fuss with that a little bit until I get it about right. That looks pretty good. And I'm going to go around the edges of this semicircle. So I'm loving how that's looking. I'm going to put this heart strip back onto my block because I know I want to use this tab thin cut to have some tabs poking out from the edges of the photos. Now, I'm not going to use this whole entire thin cut. You can see here it cuts 2 of these tabs, but this section here is actually a score mark so that when you cut them you can fold them in half and tuck and fold it over. But I'm only going to use this part here, and this section isn't going to show because it's all going to tuck underneath my photo. So I can use some scraps and cut this section out. So I'm just going to peel my washi tape off. Always bend it back like this when you're taking it off so that you don't rip the paper at all. And then I'm going to trim off where that score line is. And this is the section that I want to use, and I'm going to keep my hearts on my block here because I'm going to stamp a row of them along the tab area. And because almond ink is quite light, I can still use a journaling pen over top of this. I'm bringing in my Misty tool to stamp this notepad. This is quite a large stamp, so I want to make sure that I get good coverage. And then I just need to press down on the door, and I'm really happy with the coverage of that. I'm not going to second stamp this again. I don't mind that it's a little bit textured. So this die cut set is quite clever. You have the die cut for the note card, but you also have a die cut that creates a pocket, and these inside areas here are score lines, so you can fold this behind and slide the note card in, but I'm not going to be doing that for this layout. So I'm going to use some of these words here. So I think what I'm going to do is best day ever. So now I'm ready to adhere all the pieces together. I'm just lining that up so that that's in 1/4 inch. And then I've got foam tape on the back of this, and I'm going to line this up so that it's about 1/4 inch. I wanted to use foam tape to give a little bit more depth and a bit of a feature to the pattern paper that is underneath. And then I'm going to center this right up against the pattern paper. And then I've got the slim alphabet letters all ready to stick down. I have used the adhesive backing sheets when I've run this through, so you can stick those directly to your paper and run that through so that it's very easy to pick these up and adhere them down. Now, one thing you'll have to look for when you're doing this is some letters aren't exactly the same at the top as they are to the bottom. One of these little pieces that hangs over from the S is actually a bit longer than the other one, so you want to make sure that you line things up correctly. It's the same with the N. This section here is higher or longer than this section here. So I'm going to adhere these down inside this little title holder that I've created with the circle. So I'm quite liking how this is looking. I've got 2 4x4 photos for this left page, and what I'm going to do is bring in some splatters here. So I should have done that before I put everything down, but as usual I forget these things and I get all excited about making the layout, and then I think about the splatters later. So I'm just going to bring in a little bit of copy paper, and for my splatters I'm going to use a toffee shimmer brush. But instead of just splattering with that, I'm going to water this down because it's a little bit heavy for what I want for the look for this layout. So I'm bringing in my water brush, And I'm just going to mix that until I get a bit of a light look for this and gives a more watercolor type effect than if I had used the straight shimmer brush. So I've adhered my photos down, and now I'm going to bring in that little tab that I made before. So I'm going to adhere that behind this photo on the right here. It was just a little bit too long, that tab, that thin cutout, if I'd left it all in one piece. So I wanted to use it trimmed down so that it didn't take over from the photo itself. And then the other thing I'm going to do is bring in a little bit of this pattern paper. I've cut some strips and I'm going to use it a little bit like washi tape. So I'm going to put a piece up here, and then maybe I'll frame it down here as well. I'm going to bring a bracket in to bring attention to the title. And I didn't mention before, I've just used 3 pieces of white daisy for each letter to stack that up. And then I'm going to adhere some hearts. So this is like a cluster here that I'm going to replicate on the right page. You can see I've put these elements with a clear block on top because I want them to adhere to the page, and the glue takes a little while to dry. I'm going to bring in my journaling note card that I stamped earlier, and it's getting a little bit lost against the white. So I'm just going to go very lightly around the edges of it with almond ink and just stress the edges just enough for it to stand out. I don't want to go too heavy-handed because this, as I said before, is quite a clean type layout. So I want this to be quite subtle. If I came in with a brush or the blending tool, I would get more ink around the edges, but that's all I need for that. So this little sponge dauber is perfect just to control it a little bit more. So these are the pages all done with the busy paper partially showing through with this thin cut, and it becomes a little bit of a feature, and with the circle cut out of it, as I said before, it gives the place for the title to shine and have a home. I thought I'd show you a card that I have made using the same concept that I just did before with the scrapbooking layout, and using a paper from the same Deck the Palms pack. I'm using this hibiscus paper. On the other side of this is the Christmas present with the hibiscus and the gorgeous leaves and everything. So what I'm showing you today, you could use with any of this style of paper. But what I wanted to do was do a floral card and highlight just that section of it here. I've gone ahead and I cut a card panel to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and then I used the circle thin cut that I used before to cut the center part out of it. And to add a little bit more visual interest, I have used this soft wave or swell thin cut from the Fancy Borders and cut the edge of that off, and then I can go ahead and adhere this to the card. It's going to be a top folding card, so I've used the same almond cardstock that I used before because I think it ties really well with this pattern, and rather than having white on white, I thought the almond just highlights these flowers quite beautifully. So I'm going to adhere that down. I've actually used some offcuts of some fun foam that I have rather than foam tape for the card. I'm going to bring in my scoreboard and put this up in the corner so that I can push this up and get this lined up perfectly. And then for the sentiment, I'm going to put this just because across the circle area. When I cut the card panel from this, I had the other section of the paper. So what I've done is fussy cut out a flower from that. So I'm going to adhere this onto here as well. And now that I've got that stacked down, I can open up the card and I can trim away the overhang. On the inside of the card, I thought I would put a strip of the paper at the bottom, and then after I cut out my main floral, I thought I would fussy cut out some of the other smaller flowers to decorate the inside of the card so that when the recipient opens it, there's a nice surprise and that's decorated as well. The last thing I'm going to do is add a few little dots. I've got these Daisy Meadow dots here, and I think the colours work really well with this paper, so I'm just going to bring a couple of those in and scatter them around, and that's my card done. Here's the double page spread. A couple of things that I didn't point out while I was making this is that I've actually done a double mat that turns out to be like a triple focal point here. This 4x6 photo has been matted in mint, and then I've placed 6x4 rectangles of almond cardstock, but I've offset them so that it breaks up the solid part if I did a whole mat behind that and it all came around the edges. So I love the effect of leaving a bit of white edge on the part of my central photo here, my main photo for the layout, and spreading them out like this, it creates a great focal point and really draws the eye into this photo. And the addition of these elements really bring the title in together and makes it stand out. And using this cutout method to place a title but also bring through the pattern busy paper without it overpowering the layout works really, really well, I think. The little addition of the stamping and making sure that that continues all the way through the layout really, really helps bring everything together. And just the little details of stamping on the edges of these white sections here adds a little bit of visual interest, but I have purposefully left a lot of white space here. If you don't like the white space with something like that, you could put another photo on there. You could add more journaling, but I really like white space. I find that it is restful to look at when you're looking at a layout. I hope you've enjoyed my take on creative ways to use busy paper, and I hope all the flamingo lovers will forgive me for covering most of the flamingos up. Make sure that you check out all the other creative design teams' video that have posted so far. Following me is Andrew, and then Chelsea and Julie will have offerings with this collaboration. I'll put links below to all of their videos, and I'll also have a playlist as well that you can click on to check everything out. Make sure to stay tuned as we have some very exciting news from the creative design team coming up soon. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you next time. Happy crafting and bye for now.